part two of this edition of TW Wrestling Talk, coming off the Royal Rumble and an episode of Raw that featured the return of none other than Brock Lesnar. After a hiatus since the summer, where he apparently quit the WWE again, uh, in 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 storyline fashion, of course, which we'll get to then. This episode of Raw was actually pretty decent compared to what we've gotten in the over the past couple months. This was definitely one of the better episodes of Monday Night Raw. Overall, there were a couple things that couple things that I have neutral feelings about. Um, one of those things being the opening contest with the Miz and being the special guest referee with the Raw Roulette wheel match between Randy Orton and Antonio Cesaro. It was a situation where I don't think either three of the guys really got anything out of. Orton's facing lower talent. Cesaro's losing to Randy Orton, a guy who's main eventer, and the Miz is guest referee, but not much more than that. So I mean, things like that. Um, a match like John Cena against Cody Rhodes. I mean that's kind of that match is kind of a joke to me. It's one of those typical. You know where it's gonna go. John Cena's gonna go and unleash his 5 moves of doom, and unsurprisingly, that's what he did. Um, and and then of course, typical Cena promo to follow. Um, typical, predictable, you know, uh, pick choice that he makes when he's gonna face the WWE champion. Just go out and say it. You're not fooling anybody. Um, you know, oh yeah, he's gonna choose the world heavyweight championship. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Um, but other than other than that, there was some good stuff that happened. Um, and one of them being the the return of Chris Jericho. That was he returned at Royal Rumble, obviously, but it was good to see him back on Raw. It looks like we will have him at least. I think I think he'll lead into a match with Dolph Ziggler at WrestleMania. Um, which I'll actually talk more Dolph Ziggler later in this edition of TW Wrestling Talk. I'm gonna talk actually later on in the third part of this edition. I will talk some guys that have potential to be main event talent and what WWE I think should do with them. But anyhow, you had a decent return of Chris Jericho. Um, them him and unlikely being paired with Dolph Ziggler face Team Hell No, and that has kind of an interesting um, spin there. You kind of would think Team Hell, Chris Jericho kind of walking away from the fight and letting Ziggler kind of get screwed and Team Hell No picking up the win. Um, you had a yeah, I like this. You had a Big Show beatdown on, and I mean a beatdown on Alberto Del Rio and Ricardo Rodriguez. This is what I like to see here. Um, a guy who doesn't, just Big Show just doing what he does best. Um, this time pulling out duct tape from his back, um, wrapping Del Rio's wrist to the ring ropes, and then just destroying Ricardo Rodriguez, going back and forth between destroying him, destroying Del Rio. that was to me that was entertaining. A lot of people it wasn't, but to me, I don't care. I don't care what you know haters of Big Show think. Big Show is to me he's a great brute heel that is only benefiting WWE. So um, if you're a hater, that's your own
But they
problem.
are who we thought
So
they were.
that's that's the bottom line. This to me was a good segment here. Um, so that's that's how I see it. It was entertaining. Um, and another part, tonight was a night where the heels, tended to get the better of people here. The monster heels, you know, not some of the. I'm talking about, you know, the Big Show type, the Brock Lesnar, the Brute, you know, and then the Shield. Um, I was slowly getting to there. Um, the Shield coming out, beating down on John Cena, and beating down on Sheamus and Ryback, who both kind of, they both tried to come to Cena's aid, um, and the Shield made them all pay. So it was interesting to see them, beat up on a new guy in John Cena. You know, the Shield, you never know when they're gonna come out, and that's, I mean, sometimes you have an idea of when they're gonna come out, but sometimes you never know. And this was, this is cool. I mean, once their theme song hits, I'm hooked. They got a great theme song. Um, just kind of that kind of attitude era kind of theme music. I think that it just suits them well. It doesn't need you know fancy lyrics, and it just that hard rock and riff, and it works for them. And I just think it's a great theme song, by WWE theme song standards. So that was a good, kind of closing to that segment, that typical Cena promo segment there. So um, at least that kind of turned things around to me, um, in that regard. Um, and then, furthermore, you had a good segment with The Rock. Good promo there. CM Punk, I'm not too sure uh, about him. I mean, he was all right, but he had to come out and play this really frustrated CM Punk, flipping out, acting, really angry. I mean, he was put in a tough position, I think. Um, it's sometimes really hard to act, legitimately angry like that, flipping out. A lot of people can't pull that off. I mean, CM Punk may have partially pulled it off, but you see like AJ flipping out and losing control, and I'm just, usually to me it's just like, what? Come on, this is a little silly. CM Punk, he kind of half gave me that impression, but what he was all right. But The Rock was, you know, it was good to see him, come out on Raw. It was quite a moment. WWE champion again. Um, if only they redesigned the belt though, because I personally I think the belt could use a design change. And hopefully, maybe, just maybe, this would be the year. But you know, as long as it keeps selling replica copies and whatnot, and plastic copies, then pretty well, then it'll probably remain. But good stuff from The Rock, as usually. I don't need to go into detail there. He does his job pretty darn well. Um, and it's interesting now with the new dynamic of him being WWE champion. It appears that now that they're going to have a rematch at Elimination Chamber, 1-on-1. Apparently, that's what it seems like they're getting at. What they were getting at. CM Punk kind of saying he's giving The Rock a rematch, Um, but anyhow, I mean, it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. I would have thought it would be defended in an elimination chamber match, as was last year. I didn't totally understand. That's why they don't address this stuff ahead of time. They just they kind of just do things, and you kind of have to try to figure out what they're doing. They don't kind of WWE doesn't kind of like keep you up on the speed as to what they're doing. Um, until the week before it actually happens. They kind of like put clues out there that they're doing something different than they did the year before or whatever. So that's I don't totally get that. Somebody owes us an explanation. Yeah, I mean, just an explanation maybe. Before you start throwing out these little hints and kind of making things a little confusing. But anyhow, I mean, other than that, I mean, you know, there was the end segment, which was interesting. Um, you figured that it had to be a it was gonna have to be a big deal somehow, as it was placed at the very end of the show. Um, where the Rock is normally featured at. He featured around at the 2 hour mark, rather than at the end where he tends to be featured more often than not, um, when he's around. But th- this was an interesting segment with Paul Heyman and Vince McMahon. You know, neat dynamic there between those two. Um, Vince McMahon, providing pretty obvious evidence that Paul Heyman was guilty of enlisting the Shield in Brad Maddox and all of this stuff. That's all the controversy that's been going surrounding the WWE Championship. So and Paul Heyman, you know, playing his role pretty well on the mic. Um, his inflections on words, he's one heck of a mic worker, as is Vince McMahon. Um, and just it made for an interesting segment. Um, and then of course, right when he was about to fire him, um, and like a slightly tweaked version of Brock Lesnar's theme song hits, and it was surprising. It was great. Um, I was getting, for some reason, I was under the impression he wasn't gonna return until after the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, but it appears that's out the window now. He's back. Um, why, we don't totally know yet, but that's not an issue. It was he came out. He ordered Paul Heyman to stay in the corner, staring down Vince McMahon. Vince telling him, "Don't do anything you will regret." Excuse my kind of baby talk there. But anyhow, and ultimately Brock Lesnar just suddenly picked him up, gave him the F5. Um, that was all he had to do, and it just made the segment, and kind of stole the show as a result. So that was good stuff. You wonder where they're gonna go with him, what they're gonna do with this, if it's gonna involve CM Punk, if it's gonna involve The Rock, if it's gonna involve the Shield. We could see anything could happen here, and that's what makes it interesting. That's what make unpredictability like this. You never know. Loose cannon like Brock Lesnar, you just don't know where what he's gonna do next, and that's the cool thing about him. Whereas other guys like you know John Cena, you can typically expect what they're gonna do. It just doesn't help in the long run. Um, guys like Del Rio, you expect you're gonna do the same thing pretty much night in, night out. Um, but from a creative standpoint, you never know what a guy like Brock Lesnar is gonna do, and that's what makes it pretty darn cool. So it's great to see him back. We'll just have to wait and see what he does next week on Raw, as more likely than not, he will be back on Raw pretty consistently, I would say, and up until WrestleMania. So that'll definitely be interesting to see what unfolds in the coming weeks. on Raw, involving Brock Lesnar and whoever else, Paul Heyman and whoever else it involves. So that'll wrap this second part up of this week's edition of TW Wrestling Talk. Um, we will continue part three, talking about some potential main event talent for the future that WWE should consider using, and amending in certain ways. So stay tuned for that as it comes right your way.